Well, we are taking a 1-week break from our Christ in the Psalms series to address an issue that is affecting almost every church that I know of, affecting it right now. And the problem that is affecting so many churches is COVID-19. Not the sickness, but the emotionally charged issues surrounding COVID-19. I know of Oregon churches that have blown up, ceased to exist over COVID, gone. Many more are racked by disagreements and by power struggles right now. And I want to say as I start that I am thankful this morning that for the most part I'm preaching to the choir. I think we have done admirably well getting through COVID. We've done it together. You've been so gracious with all the different schedule changes and place changes and everything, and I think we've done pretty well. But I think, there's another statement that pastors use sometimes, that preaching to the choir is one statement, but there's another statement that goes something like, when the devil fell, he fell into the choir loft. And we're human, We fail sometimes, and even choir members sometimes are susceptible. So we are determined, Cornerstone's elders are determined to not allow COVID-related contentiousness to find fertile soil here. It's not going to happen. Our elder job description is posted online. Part of it says that the elders are to glorify God by aggressively protecting against false teachers and those who might harm or divide the church. And the reference scripture on that line is Acts chapter 20, where Paul exhorted the elders at Ephesus to guard against threats outside the church and also threats inside the church, because every church faces both external and internal threats. Satan has no conscience. He doesn't much care how he defeats Christ's work. He will do it by any and all means possible. He just wants to sabotage the church, big C, the universal church that Christ said he would build. So to keep from falling prey to Satan's schemes, we're going to look at God's Word, which is always our authority. We're going to look through the inspired pen of the Apostle Paul, and he's writing to a really good church, but one that was threatened by divisions and controversies. So if you have a Bible or a Bible app, turn to the New Testament book of Colossians, little letter of Colossians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. The big issue for the church in Colossae was false teachers who had come in and were spreading this doctrine that said you can have it all. You can believe all the gods. You can believe in the Roman gods. You can worship the Greek gods. You can worship the God of the Jews. You can keep the Jewish rules and the eating prohibitions. And you can also worship Jesus the Messiah. You can do it all. Anything that suits you. So Paul writes this letter to the church at Colossae to say, no, it doesn't work that way. You can't do it all. You cannot embrace belief systems that contradict each other. Because when you try to embrace contradictory things, you end up watering it down to the point where you've got nothing. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, the life. So Paul urges his friends at Colossae to focus on the main thing. And he does it by painting a picture of someone taking off clothing that they should not be wearing and putting on clothing that they should wear. In every family, some of the most entertaining pictures are of children who who dress up as some character that they've created in their imaginations or they read about in a book or saw on TV. Last week at the dinner that Sean and Jeff put on for high school seniors and their parents, Jeff had everyone go around and say their name and what they dreamed of becoming when they were little. Well, some of these characters, you get hints of those things in some of these old picture albums. Some children dream of having extraordinary powers. Some imagine solving human problems through personal charm or through beauty or maybe even through intimidation. Some just love being silly, and some kids obviously never grow up. It doesn't take a lot of costume, does it? Just a box of old clothes or some leftover Halloween pieces, and put that clothing on, and you can be just about anyone or anything. The idea of transforming yourself actually doesn't stop with dress-up play. You have children put on pieces of clothing as they're growing up to identify with a little league team, a soccer team, a water polo team, a basketball team. Can you remember back to the very first time you put on a team uniform? What that felt like? It made you feel big, didn't it? Made you feel important. It made you think different. It made you act different. You wanted to excel. And not just for yourself, but for the whole team, everybody that's wearing the same uniform. Isn't it interesting that in a curious way, wearing formal black, I think helps a concert band play a little better? Why is it that every branch of the military requires that all the people at boot camp especially wear exactly the same thing? How does, I've always wondered this, you Navy guys, how does all white help sailors fight? Do their job. Clean that engine room. A couple of times when I was in Mozambique, Africa, I flew with a Nazarene pilot friend named John Sprunger. Some of you actually know him. And he flew a small airplane like I did, but he always wore a uniform. And I asked him about it once. To me, it seemed a little ostentatious for the pilot of a single-engine Cessna to wear a white shirt with epaulets, and 4 stripes on the shoulder epaulets. Do epaulets really make you a better pilot? Maybe. When Paul Schmidt was an airline pilot, if you got on his big airplane and you glanced left and you saw Paul sitting there wearing faded jeans and a tie-dyed t-shirt, would you go take your seat, or would you be a little concerned? The last thing an airline wants is fearful passengers. And so they actually make pilots wear slacks and put on a white shirt with shoulder epaulets, which is what my pilot friend in Africa discovered. He said that when he first went to Africa, he dressed like I do, and he realized nobody wanted to fly with him. Nobody would get in his airplane with him. Because in Africa, if you're a pilot, you will wear shoulder epaulets. You're supposed to dress the part. You dress the part. That may not change you, but it certainly changes perceptions. It's a good rule of thumb. I used to tell the kids this. Good rule of thumb, to dress the way you want to be treated. You want privileges, you want respect, you want to win, you want to be successful, dress the part. And that is what Paul is going to tell the church at Colossae, only he's talking in a spiritual sense. He opens the letter with this: "Since then, you have been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on things above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. And then, beginning with verse 5, he says how to do this, how to set your mind on the right things. And he says you do that, first of all, by taking off certain clothes. Verse 5, put to death. It's a very violent metaphor. Take off, therefore, strip off whatever belongs to your earthly nature. Sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry. If you skip down to verse 8, it says, rid yourselves of all these things, such as these: anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. Do not lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices. So you strip off any harmful actions and attitudes. You lay them aside. You don't want to wear those rags anymore. They're not helpful at all. Instead, you dress up in 5 other qualities that reveal who you are in Jesus Christ. They show that you're part of his team. Verse 9 again, do not lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices and have put on, you dress up in, the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge in the image of its creator. And verse 11 says, when you put on this uniform, you actually lose your individuality, because you are now part of Christ's team. Here then, there is no Gentile or Jew, no circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave or free, but Christ is all and is in all. We are one team. And then Paul lists 5 characteristics, 5 clothing pieces that make up the Christ uniform. The first is compassion, verse 12. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves, put on compassion. Put on a soft heart, because Christ's own heart was soft. In the ancient world, anyone who is different, anybody who was sickly or disabled or mentally ill, was treated very poorly, sometimes brutally. That should never be true of Christ followers. Put on compassion. The Greek word literally means affection from your inward parts. So you really feel it. You're not faking it. Put on compassion. Feel it deeply. Clothing article number 2 is put on kindness. Now, kindness is not a natural human quality. The natural human quality, and you see it in little children, is self-centeredness. It's not the other person, it's me. It's my needs, my wants. Kindness is something that you have to decide to do. It's something that you have to learn to do. You teach your children to be kind. And if there has ever been a time in our society when we need kindness, it's right now. COVID-19 has taken a toll, and not just in lives. The last 18 months, it's been something of a perfect storm, especially here in the Portland area. It's been kind of a tornado. You got Antifa and BLM protests gutting what was once a beautiful city. The pandemic essentially canceled public education, call it what you want. All of our routines were disrupted. Dreams were crushed, especially for young people. And at the same time, we've been bombarded with these radioactive messages on every front. Anxiety is off the charts. You can't even get into a counselor right now. You call a counselor, they say, I'm full. Can you recommend somebody else? Nope, they're all full too. Emotions are frayed and people are on edge. Last Friday, I came across this headline. Half of Americans fear that they'll never fully recover from COVID pandemic stress. That means every other person you encounter believes that it's never going to get better, They are nagged by the sense that this is going to last the rest of their lives. And the last thing those people need is someone to shame them for it. Kindness is not only a fruit of the Spirit, it's a quality of God himself. Romans says it is God's kindness that leads us to repentance. Put on that shirt. Put on a kind shirt. Put on, number 3, humility. In the ancient Roman world, humility was really looked down on. It was scorned as a mark of weakness. The Greeks also were contemptuous of humble people. But God says it's an essential quality. Here's Numbers chapter 12, verse 3. Now Moses was a very humble man, more humble than anyone else on the face of the earth. Really? This is the guy who led God's people out of Egypt. Humble, hard as nails with complainers. But holy enough to play Charlton Heston on Mount Sinai. Isn't that amazing? Humility is not passivity. Moses became furious when he came down off that mountain and saw the golden calf. Humility is a precious commodity in people who submit their will to God. So put on humility. The fourth piece of clothing that God's people are supposed to put on, this uniform, is gentleness. Put on gentleness or meekness. Gentleness is not weakness. It's actually the steel-like quality of a mature person who knows how to use strength wisely to benefit other people. When we were having our house built, I was fascinated, this is 2011, to watch Paul Obrist, heavy equipment operator, Mikey, Paul always called him, and he still works for Paul, on this excavator. He's sitting on an excavator that weighs more than 30,000 pounds, this machine. And with just manipulating these controls, he could shave off an inch of clay to get the grade just right. That is gentleness. Lots of power, but don't have to always demonstrate it. Take it off by a half inch. Take it off by an inch. Put on compassion. Put on kindness, humility, gentleness. And last, put on patience. And patience is not gritting your teeth while you put up with these inconveniences. Patience is actually, first of all, starts with yourself. It's seeing yourself accurately. Patience realizes that you are not the most important person. So don't pretend you are. I was at Lowe's the other day, and I felt sorry for the lady at customer service. I'd ordered some stuff online, some landscaping rock, and I could tell there was some problem with the order. I got an email, said it was ready, and she turned her back to me, and she starts talking to other employees, and they started talking to other employees, and they left for like 10 minutes and came back, and she turned around, and she almost, in my mind, I saw her go like this, because she expected me to jump on her. She goes, I'm sorry, I can't find a forklift driver. In all of Lowe's, you can't find one forklift driver? Come on. Do you people, what are you in business for? And the look on her face, I thought, this lady does not need to be scolded by me. It's not her fault she can't find a forklift driver. And who am I anyway? I've got a $168 purchase when they're selling millions of dollars. Who do I think I am? So it took me 45 minutes before they found a forklift driver. But I was kind that time. I was kind. Philippians says, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as more important than yourself. Like the lady at customer service. That is the cure for impatience, thinking of the other people. Now notice that these 5 qualities all require relationships. That is the only place, the only place where you can wear these clothes is in a community, a gathering of people, which just happens to be what the Greek word for church is. It's a gathering. It's an assembly of people. I don't know about you, but many times I have thought and sometimes said that life would be a whole lot easier without people, you know? I mean, I could be a lot more like Jesus if it wasn't for the people that I have to deal with. And if other people were more likable, it would be easier for me to show compassion. I'd score pretty well on humility if I didn't have to deal with unhumble people, you know? Patience would be a lot easier if people would just hurry up. Do what I want. But that's not how it works. The command to clothe yourself in verse 12 is present imperative. What that means is, Paul is really saying is, you got to keep on clothing yourself. You have to keep on adding layers. For the rest of your life, you've got to put on these clothes, layer after layer. And that's the idea behind verse 13. Bear with one another, each other, and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. Oh boy, he would have to put that in there. How much has the Lord forgiven you? How much has the Lord had to put up with to have a relationship with you? Pass it on. Pass it on. Romans 15:1 says, we who are strong ought to bear with the failings of the weak and not to please ourselves. Bearing with another person means you don't always need to say what you think. When someone says, well, I just say what I think, what they mean is they are more concerned about pleasing themselves than helping the other person. If you are truly strong, if you've put on the right clothing, you don't have to say what you think, because you know that it may not come across as compassionate, kind, humble, gentle, and patient. The next verse of Romans says each of us is to please his neighbor for his good, to his edification. Now, I pulled that verse. I like the old New American Standard. It's my Bible that has all the notes in it. I like New American Standard of this verse because it retains this old English word that you never use anymore, edification. Edification. Ever used that word? When's the last time you used edification? It's a great word. It needs to be part of our psyche, if not part of our vocabulary. Edification comes from, well, there's one Greek root for house, plus the other part is the Greek word for roof. It's an architectural term. It's a building term. Each of us is called to help our neighbors build their house all the way to the roof. Complete it. You can only edify someone with whom you have a relationship. Truth without relationship becomes a wrecking ball, not a tape and measure and square. Truth without relationship often feels like rejection, not instruction. Here's Ephesians 4:29. Again, New American Standard, because they keep the same word. Let no unwholesome, that Greek word means literally rotten or worthless, let no rotten words proceed from your mouth, but only such a word as is good for putting on the roof, according to the need of that moment, that it may give grace, and the word there is rejoice, or rejoicing, that the house is done. Use only words that build other people up, people with whom you have to have a relationship. Make them happy. One of the biggest things that my generation, us baby boomers, us modernists, did wrong is we emphasized truth at the expense of relationships. Now, on the other hand, postmodernism goes too far the other direction. It emphasizes relationships at the expense of truth. Biblical Christianity puts truth in the context of grace-filled relationships. That is why the gospel is such good news. The gospel draws people in. It accepts people just the way they are. When truth is wrapped in scorn and condescension, it repels, doesn't attract. Jesus always started with grace, except maybe with the Pharisees, but he knew their hearts. They were hardcore hypocrites. Don't take that as the way we should do anything. Jesus started with, I accept you as you are. Now come closer because I know you're a person created in God's image, and there's some things that I want you to know. I mean, Jesus is going through Jericho, and he sees this guy's short guy, up in a tree. Think of the speech that Jesus could have made to Zacchaeus. Come out of that tree, you scumbag. How dare you betray your own people? All these people standing around here, you betrayed your own people. Now, that would have been truth. I think it probably would have got a big cheer from the crowd. Everybody, they'd be clapping. Yeah, give it to Zacchaeus. But Jesus didn't even talk about Zacchaeus' dishonesty. He went to his house, and he had dinner with him first. The woman at the well. Jesus comes up to this woman in Samaria. Hi there. Did you know God hates divorce? Why don't you have any friends here? Did you know adultery is sin? Why have you been married so many times? He didn't do that. He engages her in conversation, and he offers her living water before he says anything about the stuff that she's doing wrong. When the guys dragged the woman caught in adultery to Jesus, the first thing Jesus did was rebuke them and defend her against their self-righteous accusers. Relationships cultivate and fertilize soil so that truth can take root and grow. As one of our elders said in our meeting last Wednesday, tell them how much you care before you tell them how much you know. I think one of the biggest reasons social media is so toxic is because there's way too much truth outside of relationships. It really should be called anti-social media. I mean, the word friend has no meaning whatsoever. When I deleted my Facebook account in January, I looked and I had almost 2,000 friends. 2,000 friends. I don't have 2,000 friends. I would bet that since I deleted my Facebook account, maybe 20 people noticed that I'm not there. So let's talk about COVID and Cornerstone. The only position that the elders have taken on COVID is the one that we announced last November 5th. And it didn't have to do with COVID. It had to do with who we are as a church. Here's what we said. All through the Bible and throughout history, God's people have gathered. They gathered by the hundreds of thousands around the tabernacle. They assembled in synagogues during the Babylonian captivity and afterward. In New Testament times, Christians gathered in churches of many sizes. The point is, gathering is absolutely essential to church. Churches need to be church, whatever that looks like for a particular group. If it's a house church, they need to be a house church. If it's a mega church, they need to be a mega church. When Cornerstone started, we didn't ask the government's permission to start. We didn't ask the government how we should meet or where we could meet, because that's not the government's role. The government provides civil laws. The church is responsible for church, and we are going to continue to do church. And then the elders added 3 statements. Number 1, we plan to continue meeting. Number 2, we will be wise and alert to safety. Now, you remember last December, we actually canceled all meetings for two weeks. We planned to continue meeting, but we were alert to safety. We said, a lot of us that got COVID, let's not meet for 2 weeks. We plan to continue meeting. We will be wise and alert to safety. And number 3, we will urge anyone who is sick, experiencing symptoms, or is health compromised to take prudent measures to protect themselves and others. That third one is very, very important. What it means is we have a church full of really smart people, really responsible people who we believe will research and reason and pray and talk to their friends and talk to their doctors and talk to other authorities and then make a wise decision based on that information and the practical realities that they are living with. And every one of us lives with different practical realities. Everyone should decide for themselves what they should do. We have never taken a position on masks. I haven't worn a mask in church for, I don't think, ever. But I'll tell you, if I had a kid or my kid said, Dad, if you want to see your grandchildren, you got to wear a mask. You know what? I'd wear a mask to bed because some things are more important. We have not taken a position on vaccinations. We believe people will make wise decisions. We have one mission as a church, and that mission is to get as many people out of hell and into heaven as possible. Throughout history, churches have gotten off the rails on all kinds of peripheral issues. A couple weeks ago, I mentioned nationalism. I mean, it's been all through human history. It has never worked anywhere. Not even when the head of state was also the head of the church, either Protestant or Catholic or Islamic. It doesn't work very well. Those are some of the worst times in human history. Big mistake when churches wrap themselves with a political candidate or a political party or a flag of any color. Salem witch trials, guess who led the way? Good Christians. Good Christians. Well-meaning Christians behind those abuses. 100 years ago, many churches, most churches across the country, they went all in for prohibition. Across the country, evangelists and pastors preach the same message. You can almost hear Billy Sunday, once liquor is illegal, Americans will give up alcohol and will turn to God. How'd that work out for us? Last Wednesday, our elders affirmed the main thing. The gospel of Jesus Christ will remain the main thing. We will not divide over masks. We will not divide over vaccinations. We will build up. We will make sure that we get to the point where we can put the roof on for each other. So don't assume that you know why someone is doing what they are doing. You don't know. And you don't need to know. Grace. Grace. We all need grace. In his classic book, Stephen Covey's habit number 5 is seek first to understand, then to be understood. Good advice. 1 Corinthians 13 says it even better. Put on love, agape love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony, perfect unity. I want to end with a video that we showed 6 or 8 years ago. It's a piece that Chick-fil-A produced to train employees on customer service. And its message, if we can get it to play, is even more relevant today than it was when it was made. Let's see if we can run that video.